I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and this is episode 61. I didn't realize until I was editing the last episode that was episode 60, which is pretty cool that we're up to 60 episodes, and honestly, even more if you count the bonus episodes that I ran last summer. So, yay me, I guess. And speaking of last week's episode, I know that was a tone shift. And I gotta be honest, it felt really good. I think that I've been putting on very much a brave face for the last year, maybe longer, when things honestly haven't been the greatest in a lot of my personal life, and I've really been struggling. My breakup was a catalyst for a lot of things, and I just haven't talked a ton about it, partially out of respect for him, but also just because it's tough to be vulnerable. It's hard, but I guess that's what you sign up for when you have a podcast that's focused around relationships, for better or for worse. But I, in this episode and in another episode that's going to be airing in a month or two, I do talk a little bit more about it, not in anything detailed, but just a little bit more about its impact on me and my thoughts about it. So yeah, it felt kind of nice to be real, and talk about the shittiness that's happening in the world, which honestly to me just feels like shittiness on top of shittiness on top of shittiness. But yeah, I think I had a little bit of a breakthrough while recording the intro for the last episode. It's interesting because as I was sitting there and talking about how things change so quickly, I really took it to heart, and I just thought about how short life is and how quickly things change. There was a shooting that same week in Philadelphia, just a girl who wasn't even drinking. She was a designated driver for her friends in Philadelphia, and she got shot by a stray bullet and died, 21 years old. And you can be just living your life and something will happen that changes everything. And I know I'm not sharing anything crazy, we all know this on some rational level, but actually embodying it, is something that I feel like I started to do. I've really been able to focus on being more present ever since then, really being grateful for the moments that I have where, my life isn't falling apart, because it could be worse. It really could be worse. Things are shitty. Yes, things are shitty for everyone in the world, it feels like at this point, but I don't know, I'm having a lot more gratitude for the things and the people that I do have in my life. And just a lot more gratitude and a lot more of an ability to be present and be grounded in the moment. So that was kind of a cool, thing that happened in last week's episode. And yeah, it was just kind of nice to be real. Speaking of last week's episode, I talk a little bit about the letter that I sent to my representative. I got a bounce back email, and I penned this very long, honestly, very well written, if I do say so myself, letter to my representative telling him why he's not actually pro-life, because if he were pro-life, he would do all of these things. And I listed off things about gun control and funding for education, the homelessness crisis. I talked a lot. I got a bounce back email saying that the mailbox isn't checked. So, of course, they send back a canned response and you can't. It's just ridiculous. But you know what? I got it out there. I sent the message. I did end up resending it through his website. So guess what? You're just going to get another email from me. I'm working on being present. I got nothing but time, sir. Really quick personal selfish promo thing for myself. I don't know if you remember the episode that I ran, I think it was in fall of 2021, with Violetta, the host of the Pillow Talking podcast, but I actually did end up submitting a story to Pillow Talking, and it appeared in the most recent episode. So I'll link that in the episode notes. What she does is she narrates these different stories that people send in about intimate conversations that happen in the bedroom, and they don't even necessarily have to be sexy. Just there's so much intimacy in that space, right? So yeah, I wrote that. Pretty cool to hear my name, and she shouted out the podcast as well. So yeah, check that out. Let me know what you think. Alrighty, so if you are not a stranger to the All Ports Open network and the different streaming things and podcasts that we offer, you will know who Ben Wallis is. Ben Wallis is one of the co-founders of the All Ports Open network, and he also is the creator of a new game called Broken, about broken relationships. And we talk about the mechanics of the game. We talk about how people heal. We talk about the beauty of sadness. Yeah, I've known Ben for a while now, and he's a friend, and so it was kind of fun to just jump into a deep conversation, and he and I are no strangers to that. We did that every week on No Avatars Allowed for a very long time. Please, 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 please check out the episode notes where you can help to fund this game, Broken. You can read more about it. You can read more about Ben. Yeah, I put a bunch of stuff in the episode notes, so please check it out. I haven't played the game, and I probably won't for some time. I would like to someday, but it sounds so cool. And Ben, super proud of you for putting it together. It's honestly, it's beautiful. So yeah, check that out, and we're going to talk about it. You're going to learn about the mechanics of the game and the themes and how it impacts people, how it impacts the players. So yeah, I guess we'll just jump right into it. Going to cut to a quick commercial break, and then please enjoy my conversation with Ben.
Calling all citizens of Halcyon City. The newest generation of heroes are now painting the pages of Delinquent Comics, an actual play podcast in the game world of Masks, a new generation. Join our heroes as they struggle to build a team and save the city. Can Titan escape the shadow of his mentor burnout? Is Soul's overwhelming power too dangerous to control? Will Muse discover her past? And how does White Knight stomach all those strange snacks? Listen to Delinquent Comics to find out at allportsopen.com, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever podcasts are found. New issues become available to all citizens every other Monday.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am super excited for my guest today. It's somebody that I've known. How long have we known each other?
Oh, I don't even remember when we started doing podcasts together.
2017, 2018, something like that.
Well, it is something like that. It's crazy.
This is Ben Wallis, who is one of the founders of the All Ports Network. All Ports Open Network, which is the network that the podcast is on. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm super excited to talk to you today because we are going to be talking about gaming and healing and how those two have played together for you to the point where you created a game about it.
Yeah.
So tell the listeners a little bit about you, about your story, where you're from, what you do, how you came to be here.
Cool. Yeah, gladly. Thank you very much. So I'm Ben, and sometimes on social media I go by That Gamer Priest because I am not only the co-founder of the All Participant Network, but I'm also a member of the Episcopal clergy. I'm an Episcopal priest. People may not know what that means.
I forget all the time.
It's like the Episcopal Church, which is the church I'm a clergy in, is kind of like a very progressive Roman Catholic. It's similar to Roman Catholic in like all the trappings. We have priests. We look like wear the same kinds of vestments. We have a very similar liturgy. We have a fairly similar sacramental theology, but we also have women clergy and LGBTQ clergy and are socially progressive in like a whole host of ways. So I'm an Episcopal priest. I am I do a bunch of stuff on the internet too. So I'm a dad. I have 3 kids. I have a spouse named Mel, who I also podcast with, and Rachel has done podcasts with, actually.
Yeah. I love Mel.
And Mel and I did a podcast for a long time called Pot of Love, which was a romance and relationship actual play podcast. So we would play romance games, mostly 2-player romance and relationship games, and we would record them and tell stories with them, kind of centered around them. So that's sort of the short version of who I am. I do like a lot of stuff in the TTRPG world. I'm a game designer. I do streams. I interview people. I've done podcasts for a long time. I've been podcasting for ages now. I did a clergy podcast called Priest Pulse for a long time. So that's a lot of information for people. I've done a lot of stuff, and so that's sort of the short version.
You've been around the block.
I have
podcasting and the gaming block. Yeah. I was like, how do you find time to be a dad? You do so much.
Oh, don't ask that, because somebody recently said to me something like I was talking to a spiritual like clergy support group, and I was just talking about some of the stress I've been feeling lately with balancing everything, like spinning too many plates. And someone someone said to me like, oh, it's just like that song, The Cat's in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon. I'm like, why would you say that to me? Like, do you want me to like cry in this conversation? Like you're telling me it's like that song about like the dad is not there for his kids. Like that's what you're telling me this sounds like? Because now I just want to like go ugly cry in the corner, in the corner.
Wow.
But
that's an interesting way of.
It might be worth adding to one thing I didn't add into there, but I am divorced. I've gone through a pretty intense divorce experience, and so I'm married to Mel, and Mel is my second wife, so we have a very blended sort of mixed family household.
Right. Yeah, and actually that's leads in perfectly to my next question, which is, what's the inspiration for the game?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Well, so the game that I'm publishing in July is called Broken. It's a tragic romance game. It's a 2-player game. Basically, folks, think of a game that helps you tell stories. And in this case, it's tragic stories. And it's always a tragic story because what you do in this game is you make a relationship between 2 people. Now, that could be something very hyper-realistic. Like it could be Bob and Larry. I don't know why the VeggieTale characters popped into my head, but well, because that could actually be a game of Broken, I'm going to set Bob and Larry aside. I want to think about that one a different time. That would be a fascinating playthrough of Broken. No, it could be like we'll say Michelle and Steve, right? One of you plays Michelle, one of you plays Steve. You kind of determine what the relationship is like. You determine traits about the relationship, and then over the course of 10 scenes in the game, you break up. You'll play a story out where these 2 characters will break up and your relationship will end. But like I said, that's like a hyper-realistic example. But you could make any kinds of characters. You could set this in a historic setting. Like this could be like a medieval prince and like his courtier lover. Like, it could be a science fiction, like space warlord, or most of the games we've played are fairly like rom-com influenced, true to life kind of stories. But there's a lot of flexibility what what you can play. So that is what was the actual question? Because now I kind of distracted myself with
the inspiration. I mean, but it's good though, and I don't know if we've even said the name of the game yet.
Yeah. Right. So it's a breakup game where about broken hearts and broken physical objects. We're gonna kind of circle back to that in a minute. So I'll just talk about the inspiration, I guess. As I said, I'm a divorced person. I went through an intense breakup. I got remarried, and I, with my spouse now, Mel, we started playing all these relationship and romance games. I knew when I went through my divorce, and we went through a divorce with a kid, and that became kind of complicated. And the whole thing was emotionally complex, and honestly, it was just like I am a hopeless romantic at heart, and my story really begins way back in high school because I met my first wife when we were in high school together. We were high school sweethearts. We fell in love. I did not know that. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
We had we were those two people that everyone's like, they're the ones. Like, everyone was shocked when we got divorced because it's like, of all people, they thought we would never be the people to break up. Like, we were like inseparable in like high school and college and afterward. You know what, folks? It's interesting because a lot of times inseparable also is a sign of unhealthy or toxic relationship dynamics, as I learned later in life. But yeah, so I married my high school sweetheart, and we went through a pretty painful divorce. And I knew afterward that I wanted to heal from it through some sort of creative activity. And I thought about writing a kind of traditional memoir or maybe theological work or sort of reflection about my own theology of divorce and remarriage, because I think the church has done a lot of damage to people by not articulating a good belief structure about breakups and divorce. The Roman Catholic Church doesn't even theoretically allow divorce, right? My church does. But I believe in, not to get theological on your show here, but maybe a tiny bit, but I mean, it's who you are. Let's do it. Cool. Well, I mean, my religion is one about resurrection, right? It's all about resurrection. So to me, I was like, well, that should be new life, right? Like, that sort of post-divorce life is about resurrection. It's about like your something in your life, your marriage died or ended, and you're trying to heal and kind of find new life afterward. That's what it was like for me, coming to the other side of divorce. And so I just thought, well, it's really lacking. We're really lacking in our theology around that. Like, we allow people to get divorced and remarried, but we don't have really good theological language for that. So I thought maybe that would be how I would go through my healing process. But it just didn't seem right or feel exactly what was perfect for me, or what was a right fit for me, or adequate to what I wanted to do. And as I said, I had gotten remarried, and we were making Pot of Love, and just had this idea of, instead of like telling my story in the traditional direct way, I would instead create the framework whereby people could play a game that would create stories about breaking up and divorce, not just for the sake of breaking up or divorce, but like to also help foster a healing process for other people. I'm the kind of person, because I'm a priest, it's just in my nature to want to help people and I wanted to write my story, not just to tell it, but so that maybe it would help other people. And I thought, well, if I make a game, then lots of people can kind of, like, people who need it for the processing or the healing, they might find it for that. Other people it might help them develop some empathy, even if they don't have a divorce or like a breakup in their history. I mean, everyone's kind of broken up, right? Like, in some way, and not even just romantic relationships, but like,
friendships. Yeah.
I mean, it's just part of life, right? Like, people go their separate ways. So empathy building, the game has lots of themes of identity, self-discovery, memory, hope, loss, heartbreak, healing. And I wanted to give people the framework to explore some of those things. And that was the background of what inspired me to make the game.
That is so cool. And it actually brings up kind of a thought that I had, listen, it's so funny because I just aired the last episode where I mentioned my former partner, like it was a backlog episode that I had recorded before the breakup.
Oh, I see.
And it's funny now too, because like I have a couple guests in the pipeline where the subject's going to be breakups, and I'm just like, wow, weird timing. Okay.
Yeah.
But it reminds me a lot of something that I've been thinking about and something that I've been talking about with, some guests where that's the subject matter. There is something really, really beautiful about like a separation in a way. And maybe that's like this like writer part of me or whatever, but like I was in Wegmans because that's where I grocery shop now. I don't know how I lived without it before. But I was in Wegmans like a couple weeks ago, and I was buying flowers for myself. And, I was just, there was a little bit of sadness there, and I was just feeling like, still feeling a little blah. Why? It's been like, over 9 months. Why am I still feeling blah? And then this voice in my head just said, Rachel, how lucky are you to have loved so hard that it hurts so much?
Yeah.
And there's something to, it's kind of like the Velveteen Rabbit, right? Like, what is real? And they say real, like you become battered and bruised and, you're not neat and clean, but it doesn't matter because love makes you real.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm thinking about, as you're talking about this game. It sounds like I know that one of my past breakups, I remember saying to him, why are we communicating now that we're like separating? Like, why couldn't it have been like this the entire time? It's almost like our communication improved when we were going through, we were living together, and it was like we were going through the process of separating, and our communication just became so much better. And, the night before I moved out, we made a really nice dinner and had a dinner together.
Wow.
To like celebrate, the fact that we were so important in each other's lives. Yes, I am capable of a positive breakup. People might not believe that, but I am capable of it. And I would prefer that all my breakups, went that way. But anyway, it's just kind of an example of like how beautiful sadness really can be. And I think that people, it's so uncomfortable for people that they don't like to sit in it. And that's really interesting because another interview that's going to come up after this one, in maybe like a month or two, is about a woman who wrote a book called Sitting in the Sadness. So talk about that a little bit. Like what do you feel like you learned, or what was that emotional process through not only developing the game, but watching people play it?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So I'm also someone that loves, as I said, I'm a hopeless romantic, and that's true. And I like traditional like rom-coms and things like that. I like happy endings, but I also love sad things, love sad stories, love sad media. Like I find sadness to be beautiful. So it's kind of in some ways not a surprise that I would make a tragic game and kind of lean into that sadness. And I do have an idea for another game that's even sadder, actually.
Oh gosh.
As a spiritual sequel to this one. I won't say what it is here because I haven't mentioned it to a single soul yet.
All right.
But I kind of, so I have a spiritual sequel in mind for this one that somehow manages to be sadder. So playing the game and developing the game and playing with people has been a very fascinating experience. You learn a lot about your game by like seeing other people play it. One of the things that's just been very impressed upon me, and I kind of, so a couple of things. One, I've been surprised at how the game just naturally pulls you in to the characters and the story, even if like people kind of sit down and they're just kind of casual at the beginning. It's amazing how hard it can really pull you in. So it does have the potential to be very emotional. Like and when we get to the part where I talk about the mechanics, I'll kind of point out some of the places where I've learned how emotional can really get. But one of the things that's been really surprising too is just like how flexible the game is to tell different kinds of stories. And every person that plays it, like every duet that plays it, it's just such a different story and such a different experience. One thing I really like about doing with it, and it's been really cool to see, is like playing in the margins of other types of stories. So like what I mean by that is you could play one of the games I played was a traditional like 80s rom-com, except we played sort of the scenes you didn't see right? Like the kind of more realistic after the fact. So like one of the moments we had in our game was like the really stereotypical 80s scene where the like male protagonist showed up the bully, the antagonist in some way, like a Back to the Future type thing. And like everyone, that moment where everyone like cheers for the male protagonist and like, the girl's usually there smiling off to the side or whatever. But like we played it where our scene in the game was about how like showing that from a different angle, kind of like from her perspective, and how she ended up being like hurt in that scene and kind of ignored and kind of lost for his sake. So like that whole game was kind of like an 80s rom-com but in the margins, right? And like how like they ended up breaking up at the end in our version. Like, so
Yeah.
I like the like taking things like that and doing a twist on it. And then I've also just been surprised at how silly the game can be. The most recent game I demoed for some people, they played Benjamin Franklin and Benjamin Franklin's childhood best friend, a talking raccoon. And
Okay.
and it involved a subplot about assassinating George Washington. But you know what? Like they argued and they broke up. I mean, as far as best friends can break up, right? Like,
Yeah.
I did not. I intentionally wanted the game to be flexible, so it wasn't necessarily just romance, even though it is a tragic romance game in the title. That you could do different kinds of relationship breakups. I wanted it to be flexible enough for that, but I also wanted to be flexible enough that you could play different kinds of scenarios. But even still, I didn't kind of anticipate the amount of flexibility it really does have, while still being able to do the really deep, really hard breakup stuff that's like feels real. Like the game, I'll warn people who might want to play it, like there are safety tools built into it, but like it really does replicate the feeling of breaking up with somebody. And that can be very intense, especially if you take it seriously, and especially if you've been through a hard breakup. So like people who read the game and play the game often will say to me, I don't know how you got the feel of breaking up so accurately. So like,
that's great feedback. Yeah.
So that's a warning for people more than anything. So, just to have that in mind. But you can choose going into it. You can walk into it going like, hey, let's have a like lighthearted thing here. Like let's play let's play a little bit of a lighthearted scenario. Because you can still have a lot of fun with it. I still think it's a fun game even if you kind of do it that way. But yeah, it oftentimes is exploring some of those deeper and sadder themes.
Yeah, no, that's intense. And I mean, again, that's really good feedback. Just having somebody say, I don't know how you got that. Because going through a breakup is just such a specific type of grief, right? Like it's a death, but it's not. And like, depending on your attachment styles, how it goes down can be, it's just, I mean, I can completely see all of the different potential scenarios. I mean, I just had like 50, I feel like, pop into my head that you could do. But I guess tell us a little bit about the mechanics of the game. Like, how does it work? Walk us through
Yeah, absolutely. So
playthrough. You
basically come up with your partner, like what kind of scenario you want to play. Like, what's the couple going to look like? When's it going to take place? What genre like what kind of subgenre here are we talking about? And once you have an idea about that, each of you kind of gets an idea of like, I'm going to play this character and I'm going to play this character. So for people who might not be familiar with role-playing games, this game, like you can either kind of act as or role play your characters, kind of like D&D does, Dungeons and Dragons. People don't know. Kind of like that.
Season 4 of Stranger Things is out. I feel like people are in the know.
It's more
D&D
pervasive
right now.
Yeah, than it used to be. But or you could actually kind of just tell the story from a third person perspective, like kind of like if you're both writing a movie together or describing scenes in a movie.
Sure.
So you're going to decide which of you is going to be which character, and then you're going to get into. I left out kind of the main core mechanic of the game. The core mechanic of the game is breaking physical objects, actual real-life physical objects. And the way that works is you're going to gather a total of 10 physical objects that are going to serve as scene prompts through the game. And at the end of every scene, you're going to break one of them. So these are going to be objects you're going to be willing and able and capable to break. Sometimes people will like go thrift store shopping to like collect 10 breakable things. And that's a lot of fun because it allows you to like play with the person that you're going to play with, but like kind of beforehand. Or you could both like separately bring 5 objects to the table.
Yeah.
I've done that before too. And you don't know what other 5 the other person's going to bring. And so, yeah, you bring 10 objects to the table. Now, there is an alternative way to play where if you don't want to break physical objects, you can take popsicle sticks and you can write physical objects on the popsicle stick.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's really creative. Yeah.
And then at the end of the scene, you just snap it and it breaks really well. So it really works. It works really well. And it's another thing I've learned listening to people play that's really fascinating is just like, it's a kind of different game in some ways, depending on which of those 2 things you do. And that's because of the kinds of objects you can have. Just kind of, it changes the game. When people do the popsicle stick ones, I find people make the objects so much more like personal to the characters.
Yeah, because you can in that instance. Yeah.
Exactly. So like, a portrait I drew of you.
Right.
Or the first letter you ever wrote me.
Shit. Yeah. That's
instead of like we recently found at a thrift store a tiny violin that's a music box that plays My Heart Will Go On from Titanic.
Stop.
Yep. We broke that.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
We broke that. It still actually does play My Heart Will Go On though.
I mean, the heart goes on. The heart goes on.
Exactly.
Like, how much more beautiful and symbolic can you get with a broken music box that still plays "My Heart Will Go On"?
Yes.
Oh boy, jeez. Yeah. I mean, well, with these objects that people are picking up and breaking.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes me think about rage rooms, right? Like I'm thinking about how really physicalizing any angst that you might feel.
Yeah.
It really does help.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine that like in the context of the game, that just adding such another cool, it's almost like you've taken all of the aspects that people do when they're trying to heal and put it into like one game, you know, the physical exercise and like.
Yeah. And that experience of like, it's both cathartic, but also like it just kind of has this real physicality to play when you break something, like especially if you have to like go outside and smash it because sometimes you have to like depending on the object, that's what you have to do. And even if it's just a popsicle stick though, it just adds this being able to hear the snap, being able to feel it break in your hands, the fact that like that thing is now gone, it just like adds this whole other, it's different than just saying like, okay, and now in fiction the thing is gone. Well, like that's one thing. But like an actual in flesh object, like in our real flesh and blood object,
it's destroyed. Yeah, right in front of you.
Yep, and it can never come back again. That's it. It's gone, and it just adds, and it really just adds something to the feeling of playing the game. So that's the core mechanic, and so we like to say it's an artifact based game because you have those objects or artifacts that you break. It's also a ritual game. So, like, the way once you make characters, another really key thing to the game is you make traits. But unlike kind of a more, like a more traditional, like if you like think of traits, like my character has brown hair, my character has blue eyes, my character is tall. Traits in this game are kind of about the other person. You're going to write 5 things that your character, from a very subjective point of view, from your character's perspective, 5 things that they like about or love about or are attracted to the other person, or something that they like about being in a relationship with them. So I might put, he has just the most inviting big brown eyes. Or I might put, I feel safe and secure when I'm with her all of the time. Or like, I know she would never lie to me. And then you'll see in a minute why I laugh, because these can get pretty brutal.
I can imagine already. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah. And they're always from your character's perspective, so they don't have to be objectively true. So I might write down like, Rachel likes to be teased. But
and we all know that that's not the case.
In reality, I like to be teased, but that could then become some of the thing that you're going to fight about in the game. Like
right.
And so the way the game also plays with memory. Everything is kind of looking back on a relationship, but you don't see it the same way. So when you play out these scenes, one of the players takes a physical object and then just needs to kind of be loosely inspired by it. So like if I pick up a record, like a vinyl record, I might decide to set the scene in a record store, or I might decide to set the scene to some sort of music or at a concert. It's just a loose inspiration based on the physical object. And then I would start the game by saying, remember when, and then I would say the scene, remember when we saw the Flaming Lips in concert. And then the other player would say, but you forgot about, and adds a twist or some sort of stumbling block or difficulty or challenge, like something to the scene, like
some sort of different perspective.
Yeah. So it could be like, but you forgot about how you went off with your friends to get high during the concert and left me behind. And that could be but it could be almost anything, honestly. So then you would play out the scene or describe what happens in the scene together, like either kind of playing as your characters from their perspective, acting them out, or just kind of like describing things in the third person. And to go together, you're working to tell a little bit of a story. But the direction you're both trying to work towards is those traits that you made, the 5 things that are about the other person. You're going to work towards one of the two of you. You're going to put them in a stack so that only one of them is showing. And whatever one's on top, you and the other person both have one on top, and you want to make the scene kind of go towards one of you becoming disillusioned with the showing trait. So if let's see, I'm just trying to come up with a good example. If like the top card I have for mine is the or maybe the other person has the I love how tall he is. Like his height is so wonderful. I love how tall he is. And then the scene might have to do with going to this concert and like getting in some fight about like hoisting you up on my shoulder, the other person up on the shoulder so that they can see the concert. And then they get in some sort of fight about it. And then the scene ends when one of you feels disillusioned with that top trait. So the person might say, and then you always say, I used to think. So if I become disillusioned with the other person's height because we kind of got in an argument about them picking me up on their shoulders during the concert, I might say, I used to think that I loved how tall you are. And then I would you have a candle lit on the table, you burn the trait, and then you break the vinyl record or the physical object.
Holy shit.
And that ends the scene right there. It's over. No more is said. If you were having an argument or something in character, it's over. The moment one of you becomes disillusioned with the thing, the scene ends. And then you do that a total of 9 times. There are 10 objects. You do that 9 times. And then for the last scene, you don't do the remember when ritual anymore. You just sort of decide together, okay, and it's the breakup scene always. It's always the final breakup. So you might say, okay, how did we break up? And then you might like decide together, I think it would have happened at this place. And then once you've decided, you play out the breakup, you break the final object. And that's mostly what happens in the game.
Jeez. Yeah, I could not play that right now. Maybe in a year.
Yeah, I've had a fair number of people say to me, yeah, I don't think I can play that. Or I don't think I can play that right now. And I get that. Like, it obviously invites some intense stuff, I get it. There's going to be a lot of what we call bleed in the game design world, which means like, my personal feelings coming out into the character in a game.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, it's the same thing with like, theater.
Yeah.
The character becomes you in a way. Parts of you are in the character. That is, I mean, so here's a question. Like, I think it's good that you lay out at the beginning. It's always a breakup, right? The game is called Broken.
Right.
Like, because one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is just how hard I will try and how, like, aside from, like, abuse, I basically am like, no, we can work this out.
Yeah.
We can do this. Like, so what about, do you ever have people who are playing through the game and they're just really, really like avoiding, the conflict, trying to be as empathetic as possible, trying to be a good partner, really trying to make the breakup not happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And you could try as much as you want to, but at the end of every scene, one of you will become disillusioned with one of those things, and you'll have one less object. And eventually, you'll get to the last scene, and you'll have to break up. But by then, you'll probably want to, honestly. So yeah, people have. I've found that one of the things that tends to happen in that case is that they kind of get a really toxic relationship because one of them is trying really hard to not let it get to a breakup, and the other person kind of naturally becomes even worse, like takes advantage of it. And I've just kind of seen that happen. If you both are really trying to fight it, I don't know. I don't think I've seen anyone lean into that. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, I just know. I mean, that's like, I know for me, I'm just like, wait, people give up on relationships so easily. Like, again, aside from massive incompatibility or like again abuse or something like that, that can't be. I'm a hopeless romantic too, right? Like, I think that almost anything can be overcome.
Yeah.
Within reason.
Right.
So I'd be curious to know what that would look like if it was another person who was very much like that. And
me too.
So
it would be interesting to see how that story plays out. I would be genuinely very curious. I could tell a really good story. Now, honestly, you kind of have to, I think the idea, because it's a kind of cooperative storytelling game, the reality is that you'd have to still know as characters, like, we know we're trying to tell a good story. We want to see what would happen if we kind of try to make it work a little bit, but we both kind of have to move the game towards tragedy,
because that's the game.
Yeah, because that's the game. Yeah. So you kind of have to have that caveat. You couldn't like actively really try not to break up because you hold all the power anyway. You could just not, and that would make the game not work. But you could, you could tell whatever story you want. Essentially, it's but you'd be breaking the rules of the game, sort of. But there is one more mechanic I saved, the most gut-wrenching mechanic that I didn't tell you about yet.
Oh God. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
So after 3 scenes, so after the 3rd scene of the game, you and the other person take a voice recording device like on your phone, and you go into a space by yourself, like another room or something, and you record a message for the other person. At that point in the game, it's still pretty lighthearted. It's still like you're still kind of feeling pretty good about each other, in my experience anyway. Usually, like, you're still kind of in that, like, it's not necessarily new relationship energy because maybe your characters have been together for a while, but as players, you just started playing. You're only in 3 scenes,
right? So
you have new relationship energy to this fictional relationship. And yeah, you record that nice message for the other person. It's usually nice, as in my experience. People record like a nice little message, like, I just want you to know, I know we had a little bit of a fight, but I really care about you, whatever you might say. And at the end of the game, after you've broken up, at the end of the last scene, you play the messages back in silence. And that's the last thing that happens in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot. Because that's the beauty of it, right? Like, you're like, you were 2 people who loved each other so much at one point, and
I mean, potentially, to me, it very much captures the like feeling of the fact that once you've broken up with somebody, you're inevitably going to find their stuff, or a picture of the 2 of you, or a letter they wrote you, or a card they gave you, and that's going to come back. And those early feelings are some of the most painful parts about breaking up with somebody, is like the memories from when things were good. Remember when, like, that is the worst part. Like, for me, in my experience, the worst part was like remembering when it was good, or when it felt easy, or when like you fell in love. Like, not everyone's gonna have that to their breakup, but that was very much my experience. And like, literally today, I found a picture of my ex-wife that I didn't know I had.
Oh wow!
A physical photograph, and it was hard. It was like hearing that voicemail all over again. And I have started to cry playing this game just when we were going to hit play on the voicemails, because I remembered what I recorded. Like, I had kind of forgotten, as we played, but I remembered what I recorded, and the things that are, a lot of times this happens in the game, Rachel, just naturally, and it's so freaking hard or painful. like the nice thing you leave in the message sometimes is the very thing you end up kind of breaking up about, or like
Oh yeah,
getting in fights
absolutely.
over. And then you remember, like when you go to hit play on the voicemail, like, oh fuck, I forgot I said whatever.
Yeah.
Like and that, so yeah, so that's kind of the last period on the end of the game for when you play it.
Jeez. Yeah, and I mean, it's like, for me anyway, it's always this like, well, it makes you just ruminate. If I had done this differently, if I had done this differently, if I had just tried harder here, if I had, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's these thought cycles that are over and over and over again. So I can totally see how that would play in. And, you know, when the voicemail comes back, you're just like, maybe this was the moment when I could have done something differently.
Yes, exactly.
You know, like, so, wow, that's really powerful. I mean, and, you know, you've said that there are some people who are like, yeah, I don't think, I mean, myself included, I don't think I could do that right now.
Right.
But you do find people who are willing to lean into that. Like, I guess talk about that a little bit. Talk about the vulnerability that's required to play this game. And, you know, you have to be willing to feel uncomfortable emotions. And a lot of people just don't want to do that.
That's
so
true.
what's that experience like?
Yeah. Yeah. There was something you said initially too that triggered something I was going to say. Oh, I know. Well, I actually have been, I don't know, I kind of turned people away from this. Someone told me that, hey, what if I actually played this game with my ex? And I
almost just threw up in my mouth.
Right. So, like, I advised against that because the game is not some sort of clinical tool.
No, like, you already did the breakup. You know how it went.
It's a game, and I wouldn't want it to re-traumatize anybody. That's why we have safety tools in the game. That's why we talk about aftercare in the rule book. So I wouldn't necessarily, but my point is that that's an example of somebody who like really, you know, thought about leaning into the themes of the game. And yeah, the kind of like vulnerability it takes to play, I would say it depends again on the way you want the game to be for you and your experience. So the key no matter what is intentionality. Talk to the person you're playing with about the kind of game you want to play. If you want to have a really serious, vulnerable game, you absolutely have to discuss it beforehand. I talk about that because like you can't go into it with different. If one of you is coming in to play Ben Franklin and the Talking Raccoon, and the other person's coming in to tell like this gut wrenching breakup story, like
you got to make sure you're compatible as storytellers.
Yes. Yeah, and yes, exactly, but also in order to not hurt someone, because if the other person isn't ready for those themes or that depth, then you know they have to know that's what they're getting into from the beginning, and that's just really important. So we talk in the book about like some like rating. Hey, I want to play this PG, I want to play this G, I want to play this PG-13.
Okay.
We talk about that as like one way of providing safety, and so you can get kind of as like intense that way as you want to, or you know you can talk about safety tools in advance and say like, hey, I want to get really vulnerable in this game, so we're gonna have these as safety tools in place. We can always pause the game, we can always rewind, we can always fast forward through something if it's too hard. All that safety is going to be in the game, and so you know you can do that so that you can come to the game to be vulnerable. So I think that there's kind of different ways you can approach that, but I think that if someone wants to have like a really deep experience where they really like, if you want to cry at the end, like I've done a couple of times, then yeah, it takes a willingness to allow some bleed. It takes a willingness to, even if you're playing Ben Franklin, and when Ben Franklin and the Talking Raccoon fought in that game, they freaking fought. They were like, well, you have no idea, you know, like they were like really going at each other. And yeah, you're right. Like that's uncomfortable. Like you have to be willing to like kind of be in a little bit of an uncomfortable space, no matter how you choose to play it. And I think that's kind of, it's like some people don't like to watch the show The Office.
Yes. The secondhand embarrassment.
Yes. And so The Office is not going to be for everybody. And similarly, this game won't be for everybody because some people will look at that and just go like, I just don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to get
well, why would I do that to myself? I mean, that's what my ex would say.
Yeah. Like, why would I want to get in a fight with someone if I don't have to? Like, they don't get kind of the value of experiencing that in a game, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and it sounds so... Have you played this with Mel?
I have, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious about that.
We played the earliest version of the game before Breaking Objects was even part of the game. We played an earlier version of the game, and so we had but that was kind of by design. It's kind of a cop out because we used it to tell this really. I mean, I guess it's not really a cop out, but we used it to tell the kind of penultimate part of our Pot of Love season 2 story. From the very beginning of that season, this is a spoiler for someone who may, rare person who might want to listen to that show, but we started the second season with a couple, these two people. They were also high school sweethearts, interestingly enough. And we follow them in the story as they get married. And at the end of the season, they break up. And we used Broken for that. And then we played Broken just last weekend, Mel and I, and recorded it for a future Pot of Love episode, and that's where we broke the tiny violin.
Oh, okay, good. It just keeps playing. My heart will go on.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, here's another question. Well, okay. Wow, I have so many thoughts right now. Okay, number one, I am so glad that, I mean, I'm not surprised, but it's incredible to have a partner that's, so supportive of your healing process from like a different relationship.
Yeah.
So that's really, really cool. And how long have you been developing this one?
Well, so I kind of, how we were talking about how long have you and I know each other?
Right.
Like, I would say it's about the same amount of time that you and I have known each other. So I've been like maybe around, I forget when the idea first popped into my head, but it was kind of around the same time that the All Parts Open Network was launching. It's like 2017, 2018, but not in its version now. And I had no idea what it would look like yet. Just in its infancy. So I worked on it in earnest for this years ago, like 2018 or probably 2019. 2019, I worked on it. And then I kind of hit some writing blocks, basically, design blocks, and I set it aside. And then I eventually solved the design problems I was trying to solve and came up with the core mechanic of breaking objects in the game. And I came back to it, and obviously it's been years. Maybe it was 2020. I don't when I got that. What doesn't matter, but I came back to it.
It's all a blur.
Yeah, it is. Those years are sort of a blur. But yeah, I came back to it and I finished designing the game, and then we've been kind of working on getting all the pieces together since then. To crowdfund the game, which is how we're releasing it. We're going to be crowdfunding the game, and then my hope is that it'll have some success. Crowdfunding an ebook version of the game, and then people will start playing the game, and then my hope is to crowdfund a print run down the line. I think.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I'll definitely have you share like the link information.
Yeah, for sure.
As we wrap up, but okay. And then the other question that kind of came into my head at the same time. So, I'm a very nostalgic person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
And looking at you break these objects.
Yeah.
What do you do with them afterwards?
Well, if you're me, you hoard them.
Okay, that's probably what I would do too.
I mean, they're literally here at the table where I'm recording. There's some of them. The tiny violin I moved. Oh, I think I cleared my space to record it. I think I actually did move them all out of here now. But yeah, no, I have most of my broken objects. Well, not the sometimes you break them where you can't keep them. Like if you take as I have learned, trust me. So we talk about physical safety in the book because that's very important as well. You should always be careful breaking things so you don't hurt yourself. It's very important.
Yes.
So sometimes we'll get a ceramic bowl or something along those lines, and then it's really hard to gently break those things. You kind of have to take them outside and drop them on the ground and smash them, and then there is nothing left to keep.
Yeah.
But
it's shards of stuff. Ugh.
My stuff, like the vinyl record that we broke in the 1980s game, things like that. I'm trying to think what else. The tiny violin, things like that. Those are things I will keep as memories.
Yeah, and it's another question of it's a reminder of of a painful moment, like, you know, fictional or no. It's a reminder of a painful moment where you felt intense emotions, and you know, kind of going back to like that whole, when you find things after a breakup, like, you know, having those objects reminding you of, it's just, I don't know, that just occurred to me. I'm like, what do you do with them afterwards? Because people probably just throw them away.
I just had a thought that I had never really thought of, Rachel, and it almost makes me want to at some point add a note about this in the rule book. It may just like be the kind of thing people can just find on their own. Like maybe I don't have to include everything I think of in the book, but I just realized, because sitting here on my shelf, the one object I didn't move out of here is up on the shelf above me in my office is a bell. A little bell, like it's a glass bell. You can see the ringer inside. It's very pretty. And it's sitting there intact, not broken, because sometimes in the game, you will have an object not broken in the end. And that's because if sometimes two of you will become disillusioned with something at the same time, or it's like you kind of write down the same trait, like they make me feel safe. And you both wrote that down, and then a lot of times you're going to become disillusioned with those at the same time. When that happens, you will do less scenes in the game, which means you'll have like an object left over. And so I'm sitting here, and my bell is like sitting on my shelf here, and this is like an artifact, but it's an artifact of an unbroken object. So it's like almost hits in a different way, like, ooh, this is a remnant of our relationship that didn't get broken.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that's kind of like its own memory. It's kind of its own artifact of play. Like, I never thought about that, but I might. I don't know. It may be worth putting a note in the book that says something about that when that happens, and how you may wish to keep those artifacts, but that people might just do that naturally on their own anyway.
And you kind of went through the process that you went through of developing the game. But what does that, I mean, it's a tabletop.
Yeah.
Not even, it's a tabletop, right? Okay.
Yeah.
TTRPG.
Yes.
I know things sometimes. People are like, wait, what? Yeah. So it's a TTRPG, and the main thing that you have to do, right, is to do the mental work of coming up with this concept and writing the rule book.
Yeah.
Like that's so what other parts of the development process, you know, like the crowdfunding thing, how has that gone? You know, the press, like how's all that been going?
Yep. Yeah, thank you for asking. So I wrote the game, and a lot of times what you do is you'll hire like an artist to do like maybe sketches or art inside the book. You'll hire a layout artist to lay out the book on the page, like you would in any publishing. No matter what the book is, like you hire a layout artist, you hire an editor, in my case, a safety designer, also some other people as consultants and stuff on the project. So there's a lot of like kind of pulling those people in, and there's different, like I happen to write and do the layout of my book, and really happy with the look of it. I thought it was, I'll say, I think it's a beautiful book. It looks really nice. And it's like a full color book. There are photos in it that are that are there that like kind of show off people in relationships, or memories, or broken, or a lot of physical broken objects in the book that kind of highlight the themes. And so yeah, there's all that. So I wrote and did the layout for the book, and then the other things I mentioned before, I have other people working on with me. So there's some behind the scenes work in getting the game ready to download. And we decided for this game to do an ebook first. And we decided that for a few reasons. I wanted to get people playing the game. I wanted to get it out there. I wanted to get it circulating. I think it's in some ways, it's not necessarily easier to just do an ebook. There are actually advantages to doing a print run immediately in the game industry when you're crowdfunding. Sometimes those crowdfunds actually generate more money because people really like physical books. But I wanted to get the game out there. I have some environmental commitments I was considering. I have there's like kind of a lot of internal factors to making that choice, and I decided that the best thing for this game was to do an ebook first and get the game out there and get people experiencing it. And then if we generate interest, which I think we will, we'll do another crowdfund, I think, to do a print run of the game. So far all the pieces have been coming together really well to do the itch funding, and we're using use slang there. I've been trying hard not to use slang, but we are using a website called itch.io instead of Kickstarter. Now, itch.io gives a lot of power to the creators. It's not an all or nothing funding like Kickstarter is. It is essentially much more transactional. So like on the day our campaign goes live in July, on July 19th, people go to the website for it, and I know we're not at the plug part, but they go to the website for it, and they can support it like you would on Kickstarter, but you would back it for a certain amount of money. Let's say you say 20. So let's say you decide to back it at $20. You don't only get a commitment that the game at some point in the future is going to be finished. You actually get the game immediately. You get the current, what we're calling the Ashcan version of the game right away, and you can start playing it immediately. And when the final version of the game is finished, the full book is done, you will also get that full book. And if we unlock stretch goals, you'll get that stuff as well. So you get something right away. You have bought something. And if we don't necessarily hit the goal, people have still bought something. So there is sort of this built into it, this expectation that people should know that, like, if you purchased a game or you back the game and it doesn't fund, you have the game, you have already spent the money. So there's some risk that like you might not fund the fullest version of the game, but you do get the game right away anyway, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're putting down money, you get a product, right? So that's cool. Yeah, no, I definitely can see why that would be an appealing option rather than like Kickstarter, I feel like, which has its things, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of pluses to Kickstarter. But I'm not here to trash them or anything, but I think for the release of our ebook, that doing it on this digital platform of itch.io, I think it was just the right choice for our game.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was going to ask you about like how you indulge in self-care in the making of this game, but I guess that also kind of opens up to you talking about the aftercare that you kind of mentioned in the game and what that looks like.
I do talk a little bit about aftercare in the book and the importance of doing aftercare. So like, I think aftercare is going to look different for different people playing the game. I think it involves communication first and foremost is the most important thing. Communicating your wants and needs after you play with the other person you're playing with. Aftercare might just be as simple as, hey, we're just going to talk about that game. How did it go? What did you think? Did you have fun? It could be more like, I need you to hear me out on this, or I need some sort of physical presence from you or physical touch from you, or I need some space from you. And maybe the person who has a lot of feelings involved needs to do something else afterward too. Like, my aftercare is going to be taking a bubble bath, or my aftercare is going to be, going for a run, or whatever it might be for the individuals playing. And, like my self-care, you kind of laced that in. How do I indulge in? Well, I can tell you what I've been doing. So I said I was a hopeless romantic always. And so because this is a tragic game, and it's sad, and I've been playing a lot of sad games, and I've been listening to people play the game and getting really sad with them, I decided I needed to do something really silly and ridiculous and watch some trashy reality romance television.
Oh, nice.
And like, there you go. Sometimes tweet about it, but mostly just like really just enjoy the ridiculousness. So I just finished season 2 of Love is Blind on Netflix.
Oh, so good.
And I started season 1 because I hadn't seen it yet. So I jumped right to
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think Netflix kind of like sold me on season 2 right away. Like, I guess it was their newest season of it.
Yes.
And they like were pushing me on season 2, and I just jumped into season 2. And
you're
then,
like, all right, sounds good.
Yeah. So that's my current self-care.
Okay. No, that's a great answer and makes complete sense for, the juxtaposition of the game. Well, what is your advice for people working to like survive through heartbreak? People who are trying to process, people who are, just going through it, and
yeah.
What's your advice?
It really depends on where you are in your process, I think, and where you are in your heartbreak. I really think kind of what that answer looks like. Because if it's still so new and if it's still so raw, the first and most important things you can really do to try to survive, if you're not, is like going into therapy if you're not already. I mean, everyone should be in therapy, but go into therapy. So, that's just my advice. But I think depending on where you are in the healing process, my first gut reaction to the answer was play. Not necessarily this game, but like, or even a game at all, but play. Like, find some sort of playfulness with and for yourself, and that could be just a whole bunch of things. It could be a hobby for somebody. It could be some way to just have fun, laugh, and be silly. Go out with your friends. Maybe you go to the bar, whatever, like whatever it is, but like play, have some playtime, play a board game with some friends, something that's going to be play for you, because the act of play is so healing in and of itself. It's like the way human beings really engage in both joy and transition. I'm a big believer that play is the space that like we created. No, I said I'm a big believer in this. I didn't make it up. This is from psychology. But play is the very space we developed as children while learning to transition in life away from our mother or parent or whatever to the rest of the world. And so
Ooh, I like that.
play is transition. Play is moving on, right? And play oftentimes is the space by which we heal, and handle transition. So yeah, I think that's one of the best things people can do to survive heartbreak, or find because you'll engage in these other things that you also need to do as you're surviving heartbreak, which is self-discovery. It's very intentional that the traits in the game Broken are things about the other person or being in a relationship with them, because so often relationships that are going to end in breakup, one of the traits that those kinds of relationships have is that people tended to identify themselves in the other person or in their relationship with the other person.
Absolutely.
And so it's by design that the game leaves you at the end with no traits, and all you can do is ask, like, okay, so who am I now? And that process of figuring out who you are now, who are you as a single person, especially if you've been in a relationship for a long time, I think is a huge part of like thriving afterward and asking that question and discovering yourself. And play is just one of those ways in which we can discover ourselves again.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Really great answer. And a good way of, like, I feel like the same way, but I never would have, phrased it in that way. So that's interesting. Well, Ben, how about you give us the details for where, people can find you, where people can learn more about the game, where people can fund the game. Like, this is your time to promote.
Yeah. So folks, if this is, I don't know when you're listening to this. If you're listening to this before July 19th and before the game has launched, you can go to bit.ly/broken launch. bit.ly/broken launch. And if you put your email address in, you will get just one email only. I promise, only one email when it goes live, inviting you to fund the game. So on launch day, you'll get a reminder, hey, the game has gone live, and you can click on this link and go to the game. If it's if this is after July 19th and the game is live, it's bit.ly/broken game. bit.ly/broken games. If you can also go to Apon Games on itch.io, or it's just bit.ly/Apon Games. If you follow us there, you'll also get notified when the game goes live, or you can find Broken on there if it's live and after the fact. And people can also find me on Twitter, by the way. I am pretty heavy on there. And my Twitter is at Benjamin Wallis, spelled Wallis. So yeah, I guess that's all my plugs. I do have a link tree. It's that Gamer Priest. If people want to like find everything else I do, it's out there. So
I find that Linktree is so helpful for just having everything in one place. Like, there, everything's there.
You know what? I didn't know. Some people made some jokes about it. I didn't know that Linktree was kind of famous for people putting like their OnlyFans and things on there. Like,
interesting.
I think it used to have a implication of that it definitely does not anymore. But I think, or at least a lot of people used it that way to like share like that kind of stuff that maybe was just a slightly more what would be the right term? Not hidden, not that that has a negative connotation, but just like discreet, I guess.
Sure.
Was using a link tree to share all those links. But
Oh, interesting. Go figure. Learn new things every day. All right. Well, any last pieces of advice, wise words, etc. before we sign off here?
No, I don't think I have any advice or wise words. I hope folks will check out the game while it's crowdfunding or after the fact. And yeah, I just kind of hope that if you play it, I don't know, if you play it and you're someone who's had a hard breakup or gone through a breakup, I hope you find a little bit of a new insight, maybe just like a new insight from playing it. That's my hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ben. It's been great talking to you, catching up with you. And everybody check out the game, Broken. And this episode's going to air on the 15th. So if you're listening to it right away, you can head right on over there.
Awesome.
Yeah. Other than that, everybody, thank you for listening. You have been listening to Wine, Dine, and 69. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and let's keep talking.